Pain is a strange teacher. It enters our lives uninvited, rearranges everything we thought we knew, and demands we look deeper than we ever wanted to. It doesn't ask for permission. It doesn't wait for readiness. It simply arrives, sometimes gently, sometimes brutally, and forces transformation upon us. Many try to resist it, to escape its grip by numbing, denying, or distracting themselves. Yet, those who have truly suffered know that the only way out of pain is through it. Pain refines. It strips us bare, burns away illusion, and reveals who we really are underneath everything we thought we had to be. When we experience deep pain, our first instinct is to identify with it, to let it define us. I am broken, we say. I am unworthy. We start to build our identity around our suffering, not realizing that this is the very trap that keeps the wound open. But pain is not meant to define. It's meant to carve space within us, to make us more aware, more real, and more compassionate. Pain refines us in the same way fire purifies gold, not by destroying it, but by melting away what is not essential. To be refined by pain means to stop running from discomfort and begin to ask, what is this trying to teach me? It means seeing suffering not as punishment, but as a profound invitation to self-knowledge. Every disappointment, heartbreak, and betrayal carries a mirror, one that reflects the deeper truths we've ignored. The universe doesn't send pain to crush us, it sends pain to awaken us. When everything we depended on falls apart, when the world stops making sense, that's when the deeper layers of the psyche start to speak. Pain breaks the surface of the unconscious, revealing the hidden structures of our beliefs, attachments, and fears. The refining power of pain lies in its ability to dissolve illusions. We live much of our lives chasing images of happiness, approval, and success, believing that fulfillment exists somewhere outside of us. Pain interrupts that chase. It takes away what is false so that we might see what is real. When life strips you of what you thought you couldn't live without, it shows you what you actually are, beyond the roles, beyond the masks. The refining process is rarely gentle. It dismantles identities. It burns through expectations. It forces humility upon the ego, leaving behind only what is true. People who have been refined by pain carry a quiet strength. You can sense it in their presence. They do not seek to impress, they seek to understand. They do not react from fear, they respond from awareness. Their energy feels grounded because they've met their own darkness and survived it. When you've walked through your own fire, you stop being afraid of other people's flames. You recognize that everyone is carrying their own invisible battle, and instead of judging, you begin to listen differently. Pain has softened their edges, but also sharpened their perception. They can see through facades because they've learned to see through their own. Refinement through pain is not a one-time event. It's a lifelong alchemy. Every new challenge, every new loss presents another opportunity to shed another layer of false identity. Those who grow through pain understand that transformation is cyclical. We break, rebuild, and break again, each time a little wiser, a little freer. What changes is not the presence of pain, but our relationship with it. Instead of resisting it, we begin to allow it. We begin to trust that it carries wisdom. And in that trust, pain loses its power to destroy and gains its power to transform. Pain refines perception. It teaches us to notice the subtle, to value the simple, to find meaning in what once seemed insignificant. After suffering, The sound of laughter feels different. The warmth of sunlight carries a deeper sweetness. The presence of a kind person feels sacred. Pain reawakens appreciation by reminding us how fragile everything is. It reveals that joy isn't found in grand achievements, but in the small, quiet moments that often go unnoticed. When pain has stripped you down, you begin to see beauty not as perfection, but as authenticity. A cracked heart, after all, lets the light in. Pain also refines love. Before we suffer, we love with expectation. We love to be loved back, to be validated, to be seen. But after we suffer, love becomes something else entirely. It becomes an act of truth, not of need. We begin to love not because it makes us feel whole, but because we already know what it feels like to be empty. We understand that love is not control, not possession, but presence. Pain purifies love of its egoic attachments and teaches it humility. It reminds us that to love deeply is to accept impermanence, to risk loss, and to still choose connection anyway. Pain refines integrity. It exposes the parts of ourselves that lie for comfort, that pretend for approval, that conform for belonging. When we've suffered enough, we can no longer live dishonestly. The cost of inauthenticity becomes too high. Pain forces us to stand in truth, even when that truth isolates us. It gives birth to courage. Not the loud kind that seeks attention, but the quiet kind that simply refuses to betray the soul again. We learn that peace is not found in avoiding conflict, but in living aligned with what feels true within us. Perhaps the most profound refinement pain offers is compassion, not the sentimental kind, but the deep, grounded compassion that comes from knowing suffering firsthand. It's the compassion that doesn't pity, doesn't judge, and doesn't try to fix. It simply understands. It recognizes that every person's behavior, no matter how confusing or cruel, is often born from their own unhealed wounds. This doesn't excuse harm, but it allows empathy to exist alongside boundaries. Pain refines us into humans who can hold both strength and tenderness at once. To be refined by pain is to realize that the soul's growth rarely looks graceful. It's messy, uncertain, and often unbearably human. Yet within that struggle lies the seed of consciousness. Every wound becomes a doorway, every loss a teacher. Pain removes what is superficial so that essence can emerge. It does not define us by our suffering, but it does reveal what we are made of. Through pain, we discover the unbreakable core that no external event can touch. The part of us that watches, endures, learns, and ultimately transforms. There is a silence that does not come from peace, but from having seen too much. It's not the absence of sound. It's the presence of understanding too deep for words. Those who have truly suffered often carry this kind of silence. It is not emptiness, it is fullness contained. They have walked through chaos, betrayal, and despair, and somewhere along the way, they learned that language has limits. Words can describe wounds, but they cannot hold the vastness of what the soul has endured. So they grow quiet, not out of fear, not out of avoidance, but because they have realized that silence can hold truth in a way speech never could. The silence of the survivor is not born overnight. It forms slowly, after countless attempts to explain pain that others could not understand. They have tried to put their suffering into words, only to see misunderstanding reflected in other people's eyes. They have seen how easily pain becomes conversation for others, how trauma becomes entertainment, how sincerity becomes spectacle. And so they stop explaining. They stop justifying their tears. They stop seeking validation from ears that have never known the same storms. In their silence, they reclaim ownership of their experience. What was once a wound becomes sacred ground, not open for public interpretation. This silence is often mistaken for detachment, but it is not numbness. It is depth. Those who have survived real pain feel everything, sometimes more than they want to. They simply no longer need to broadcast it. Their emotions move quietly, like deep ocean currents. They have outgrown the need to be seen in their suffering because they have already seen themselves through it. Silence becomes their companion, not because they lack words, but because they have found something more honest than words' presence. In a world addicted to noise, the silence of the survivor is unsettling. People expect stories, explanations, and expressions. They want visible proof of healing. But the survivor knows that healing rarely announces itself. It happens quietly, in unseen moments, in the breath you take after waking up from another nightmare, in the choice to trust again even slightly, in the softening of anger that once defined every day. Silence becomes the language of endurance. It is the way the soul speaks when it no longer needs to defend itself. Silence also protects. Those who have suffered too deeply understand that not every listener is safe. They've learned how easily vulnerability can be used against them. The world is not always kind to brokenness. It often romanticizes it, distorts it, or rejects it. So the survivor guards their truth. They no longer hand out pieces of their heart to anyone curious enough to ask. Their silence becomes a boundary, not a wall, but a filter. Only those who can meet them with genuine presence, with empathy, and without intrusion are invited into that quiet space. But within that silence also lies something remarkable: wisdom. Because in the absence of noise, they've learned to listen differently. Survivors hear what others miss. They notice tone, pauses, and energy. They read the unspoken, the subtle tremors beneath words. Pain taught them to listen beyond language, because their own cries once went unheard. This refined sensitivity becomes their hidden gift. They understand the human heart not through theory, but through experience. They can sense when someone is pretending to be fine because they remember the taste of pretending themselves. Silence also transforms how they see conflict. Those who have suffered deeply no longer waste energy proving themselves right. They've seen that battles of ego lead nowhere. When you fought for your sanity, you lose interest in arguing for your opinion. Their silence during confrontation is often misunderstood as submission, but it is actually mastery. They've learned that peace is more valuable than victory. They choose silence not because they are weak, but because they are no longer willing to lose themselves just to be understood. The silence of the survivor carries another paradox. It can be both heavy and healing. Sometimes it isolates them. The inability to articulate what they've gone through can make them feel alien, unseen, or misunderstood. They may drift away from those who once felt close, not out of rejection, but because shared language has vanished. Yet, in solitude, they begin to meet a deeper companion, their own resilience. Silence becomes a bridge back to themselves. It's in those quiet moments that they rediscover who they are beyond the pain. The observer, the thinker, the one who survived. For the survivor, silence is also a form of dignity. When they choose not to speak of what broke them, it's not denial. It's strength. It's the refusal to let their suffering become spectacle. It's their way of saying, I don't need the world to validate my pain for it to be real. They've realized that the loudest healing isn't always the most authentic. Sometimes the quiet endurance of simply continuing to live is the most powerful act of defiance there is. Within that silence grows compassion. When you have been silenced by suffering, you develop a profound respect for the silences of others. Survivors rarely interrupt someone's pain with advice. They don't try to fix or rush the healing of others. They understand that each person must face their own darkness in their own way, at their own pace. Their empathy is quiet, patient, and unwavering. They know how to sit in someone's grief without needing to make it disappear. They know that sometimes the most healing thing you can say is nothing at all. Just to sit beside someone in stillness, letting presence speak where words cannot. The silence of the survivor also reflects a spiritual transformation. Through pain, they've discovered the difference between outer noise and inner truth. They've realized that the world's noise, opinions, expectations, judgments, can drown out the soul's voice. Their silence is an act of rebellion against that noise. It's a way of creating space for clarity, for intuition, for the whisper of something eternal within them. They don't fill silence with distraction anymore, they inhabit it. They have come to understand that in silence, one can hear life itself breathing. Those who live with this kind of silence become mirrors for others. Being near them can feel grounding, unsettling, or deeply comforting, depending on what the other person carries within. Their calm presence reveals how noisy most minds are, how restless the world has become. Their quiet strength exposes how much we rely on noise to feel alive. Survivors don't need constant motion anymore because they've already met stillness, not the peaceful kind, but the kind that comes after chaos. Their silence is not emptiness. It is the echo of everything they have endured, transformed into wisdom. It holds grief and grace, loss and insight, all woven into one steady rhythm of being. It is the silence that follows after a storm, not because the world has gone quiet, but because the soul has. In that silence lives a kind of truth that cannot be spoken, only lived. Empathy is not always a gift we are born with. Often, it is something we are burned into. It grows out of the ashes of what we've lost, out of the moments when the world broke us open and forced us to feel the unbearable. Those who have suffered too deeply often develop a form of empathy that is not taught, not learned, but remembered. It is as though their pain awakens an ancient knowing within them, a recognition that every human heart beats with the same fragile rhythm, that every soul has its breaking point. Pain becomes the great equalizer, dissolving illusions of separation. The one who has suffered deeply begins to see others not as strangers, but as mirrors of their own struggle. To be shaped by suffering is to know what it feels like to be unseen, unheard, misunderstood. Those experiences carve deep channels in the heart, and through those channels, empathy flows. When you have known loneliness, you recognize it in another's eyes instantly. When you have been betrayed, you sense the tremor in someone's voice when they speak of trust. When you have lost something you loved, you can feel grief before a single tear falls. This sensitivity is not weakness, it is evolution. Pain refines perception, sharpening awareness of what others are too busy or too safe to notice. Empathy born from pain is not about pity. It's not about feeling sorry for others or rescuing them. It's about understanding the raw humanity in them, because you have met it in yourself. Those who have been through the fire know how to sit with someone else's suffering without judgment. They don't rush to fix because they know pain cannot be hurried. They don't offer empty reassurance because they remember how hollow it felt to receive it. Instead, they offer presence, a kind of sacred stillness that says, I see you, I've been there, you are not alone. This empathy is often quiet. It doesn't need to announce itself or seek validation. It moves subtly through gestures, tone, and energy. Survivors of great pain often become the ones who notice when someone is pretending to be fine. They sense the tension behind a smile, the exhaustion behind confidence, the fear hidden under anger. Their perception becomes almost intuitive, as if their own suffering has tuned them to the frequency of human vulnerability. They read between words, between silences, between the smallest cracks of composure. Pain has made them fluent in the language of what remains unspoken. There is something paradoxical about empathy that arises from pain. It coexists with boundaries. Those who have suffered too much know that compassion without discernment leads to self-destruction. They have been drained before, used, or misunderstood in their attempts to help. So their empathy matures. It learns to flow wisely. They no longer feel responsible for saving everyone. They understand that true empathy doesn't mean carrying another's pain. It means accompanying them through it without losing oneself. This balance between feeling deeply and protecting one's energy is one of the hardest lessons pain teaches, and only through experience can it be truly understood. Pain deepens empathy because it dismantles the illusion of control. When life shatters your certainties, you realize how easily anyone can fall apart. It humbles you. You stop measuring people by their mistakes or appearances because you've seen how suffering can change a person beyond recognition. The one who was once strong can crumble overnight. The one who was once cold can weep like a child. The one who smiled can be dying inside. Pain reveals that beneath all our differences, status, beliefs, defenses, we are made of the same fragile material. This realization transforms the way we look at others. Compassion stops being a moral choice and becomes an instinct. Empathy born from ashes often leads to quiet acts of service. Those who have been through darkness feel an unspoken responsibility to prevent others from feeling abandoned there. They become healers, listeners, creators, and comforters, not because they set out to be, but because they cannot help it. Their presence alone becomes a balm. When they speak, they do so from truth, not theory. When they listen, they do so with their whole being. Their empathy is not performance, it is resonance. It emerges naturally from the depth of what they have endured. This kind of empathy also redefines strength. Society often equates strength with stoicism, but survivors know that strength is the ability to remain open after being hurt. It is choosing to feel again after being shattered. It is loving again after betrayal, trusting again after loss, and caring again after indifference. Their empathy is not naivete, it's courage. It takes immense bravery to stay soft in a world that rewards hardness. To continue feeling after life has shown you every reason not to is the mark of a heart that has risen from its own ashes. Empathy born from suffering has another dimension: forgiveness. Those who have truly suffered understand that holding on to resentment only prolongs the pain. They learn through years of inner struggle that forgiveness is not about excusing the one who hurt them, but about releasing the grip of the past. Their empathy extends even to those who wronged them, not because they condone the harm, but because they recognize how unconscious suffering breeds more suffering. They see that cruelty is often a symptom of inner emptiness, that the ones who inflict pain are often running from their own. This awareness doesn't erase boundaries, but it softens judgment. Empathy also changes how one relates to joy. When you have suffered, happiness no longer feels like a guarantee. It feels like grace. You stop taking moments of peace for granted. You start noticing the small things. A stranger's kindness, a quiet morning, a genuine conversation, and they move you deeply. Empathy heightens appreciation. Because you've tasted despair, even the simplest joy feels sacred. You no longer chase constant pleasure, you value connection, authenticity, and truth. This quiet reverence for life becomes your way of honoring all you've survived. For those who have risen from deep suffering, empathy is not optional. It is the natural consequence of awareness. Pain opens the heart not by choice, but by necessity. When the old layers of identity are burned away, what remains is sensitivity, not fragility, but a deep sensitivity to life in all its forms. You start feeling the world more vividly, the sorrow of others, the beauty in imperfection, the quiet dignity in endurance. You recognize yourself in everything and everyone. You understand that pain and love are not opposites, but twin forces shaping the human soul. Empathy born from ashes is the transformation of pain into understanding, of suffering into connection. It is the ability to see the invisible threads that tie all beings together, to feel the collective heartbeat of humanity pulsing beneath every experience. It does not shout, it does not demand. It simply exists, quietly guiding those who have been broken to become the ones who help others remember that healing is possible. Trust is one of the most delicate currencies of the human soul. It is invisible, fragile, and often only truly understood after it has been broken. People who have suffered too much know this intimately. They have given their trust freely before, to lovers, friends, family, or life itself, only to watch it shatter in their hands. And from those pieces, they learn something profound, that trust, once lost, is not easily restored. It becomes sacred. It is no longer something to be offered carelessly, but something guarded, honored, and earned through presence, consistency, and truth. When a person has been betrayed or deeply disappointed, something fundamental in their perception changes. They begin to see how easily words can deceive, how actions can disguise intentions, how promises can be made without meaning. The innocence that once allowed them to believe in everyone's good nature slowly fades, replaced not by cynicism, but by discernment. They no longer assume honesty, they observe it. They no longer confuse kindness with integrity. They study the patterns, the silences, the follow-through. Trust becomes something they give with full awareness of its weight. It is no longer automatic. It is sacred. Pain teaches the soul the cost of misplaced faith. It teaches that not everyone who smiles wishes you well, and not everyone who listens truly hears. Those who have suffered through betrayal carry this wisdom quietly. They know that love without trust is an illusion, and that the most dangerous wounds are not the visible ones, but the emotional fractures left by broken promises. Yet, despite all of this, they do not stop trusting entirely. They simply trust differently. Their trust becomes a slow, growing plant, nourished not by words but by time. To such a person, trust is not a gift, it is a ceremony. Every act of reliability, every honest word, every consistent gesture becomes part of a sacred exchange. They watch how someone treats their absence as carefully as their presence. They notice if empathy is given only when convenient. They pay attention to the small betrayals, the subtle dismissals, the half-truths, the moments of neglect. Because they know that trust rarely breaks in an instant, it erodes quietly like stone underwater. And when they finally choose to trust, it is not because they are blind, but because they have seen clearly and chosen anyway. For those who have suffered, the rebuilding of trust often begins within. Before they can trust another, they must first relearn how to trust themselves, their intuition, their perception, their boundaries. Pain can distort our inner compass. Betrayal can make us doubt our own reality. Reclaiming self-trust is therefore the first step toward healing. It is the act of saying, I believe what I feel. I trust my judgment. I will not abandon myself again. When that internal trust is restored, external trust begins to form naturally, not out of desperation, but out of discernment. This inner transformation changes how they love. They no longer confuse attachment with trust. They understand that love without safety is chaos, and that safety is built through truth. Their relationships become slower, quieter, more intentional. They are no longer seduced by grand gestures or poetic promises. They are drawn to stability, honesty, and emotional transparency. They are willing to wait because for them, real connection is not built in moments of passion, but in moments of consistency. The sacredness of trust also transforms how they view betrayal. Instead of seeing it only as cruelty, they begin to see it as revelation. Pain exposes what was hidden. Betrayal removes illusions. It shows who someone truly is and who they themselves have become through it. Many discover that what hurts the most is not the betrayal itself, but the part of them that ignored their own intuition leading up to it. Through this realization, they learn to listen differently. Their intuition becomes sharper, quieter, wiser. They no longer need proof. They sense truth in energy long before it is spoken. When trust becomes sacred, communication also changes. Those who have been hurt speak less to convince and more to express. They do not argue endlessly to be understood. They share once and observe. They no longer chase reassurance because they know that true trust cannot be forced through words. It must be lived through consistency. They learn that silence can reveal more than explanation, and that time exposes everything false. Their interactions become clearer, cleaner, more authentic. Pain also teaches them that self-trust means saying no, even to what feels familiar. People who have suffered often attract similar patterns until they learn to recognize them. Every time they honor their boundaries, every time they walk away from dishonesty, they strengthen their relationship with themselves. This self-loyalty becomes sacred. It is the inner contract that says, I will not abandon myself for the comfort of false connection. And when they finally choose to let someone in, it is not out of loneliness, but alignment. Trust becomes sacred because it is finite. Once broken too many times, it cannot be regenerated through apology alone. It needs time, transparency, and accountability. Those who have suffered understand that forgiveness and trust are not the same. You can forgive someone and still not let them back into your inner world. You can release resentment without reopening the door. Forgiveness is grace, trust is choice. Pain teaches the difference. In their sacred view of trust, honesty becomes an act of love. They no longer lie to themselves to preserve illusions. They no longer pretend to be okay just to keep peace. They value truth, even when it hurts, because they know that only truth can sustain intimacy. They would rather face discomfort than live with deceit. Their relationships, therefore, may be fewer, but they are deeper. They are not interested in superficial bonds. They seek connections built on integrity, empathy, and shared reality. Those who hold trust as sacred also redefine vulnerability. They understand that being open does not mean being exposed. It means being authentic while still protecting the sanctity of their heart. They share selectively, not to withhold love, but to preserve balance. Their vulnerability is no longer reckless, it is intentional. It is the quiet courage of saying, I am willing to open again, but not without awareness. A trust, once sacred, changes how one perceives others. The person who has suffered learns to see beyond appearances. They notice alignment between words and actions. They sense when someone's energy contradicts their tone. They understand that real trust cannot exist without emotional safety, and that safety cannot exist where truth is absent. This awareness makes them both tender and discerning, open, hearted but not naive, compassionate but not easily deceived. When trust becomes sacred, life itself is approached differently. They no longer expect certainty, they value sincerity. They no longer need perfection, they need presence. They no longer look for people who never falter. They look for those who own their mistakes and repair them with humility. They know that trust is not about never falling. It's about how one behaves after the fall. For those who have walked through the ruins of broken promises, trust becomes a spiritual practice. It is the slow rebuilding of faith in humanity, in love, and in the self. Each time they choose to trust wisely, they reclaim a fragment of innocence, not the naive kind that once believed blindly, but the mature kind that believes consciously. It is trust tempered by wisdom, purified by experience, and protected by truth. There is a certain light that exists only in those who have been through darkness. It's not the bright, effortless kind that comes from ease or good fortune. It's a softer, steadier glow, one that flickers behind the eyes of those who have known despair, loss, or deep loneliness. You can recognize it instantly. It's the calm in their presence, the stillness in their voice, the way their gaze seems to see through masks and reach directly into truth. That light is not born from happiness. It is born from survival. It is what remains after everything else has been stripped away. People who carry this hidden light rarely speak of what created it. They've learned that some stories lose meaning when spoken. They have seen how words can cheapen sacred pain, how others may listen but not truly understand. So they carry their experiences quietly, like a flame cupped in their hands, fragile, precious, and deeply personal. This silence does not mean they are detached. It means they are reverent. The light within them was not given, it was earned. The light behind their eyes is the residue of transformation. To have suffered deeply is to have stood on the edge of the self, where everything familiar disintegrates, and you are forced to face what lies beneath identity, comfort and certainty. It is in that abyss that something mysterious happens. The collapse becomes awakening. Pain forces awareness. Despair becomes a mirror that reflects not only what you've lost, but what cannot be taken. The more one suffers consciously, the more one sees that within the chaos of destruction, there is a quiet intelligence at work. A push toward becoming whole. This light does not arrive suddenly. It emerges slowly, often unnoticed, like dawn after a long night. At first, there is only darkness, grief, confusion, numbness. But somewhere within that darkness, something begins to stir. The faint realization that life continues, that breath still happens, that there is still a part of you that observes, that endures. That part is the seed of the hidden light. It grows each time you survive another day, each time you choose not to give up, each time you create meaning where there was once only pain. Over time, it becomes a quiet radiance, not loud, not showy, but deeply grounding. The people who carry this light often have a certain way of being in the world. They do not rush, and they do not force. Having seen how easily things can fall apart, they've learned to appreciate the fragility of everything, relationships, plans, even emotions. They move through life with humility, aware of how little control we truly have. Their light is made not of certainty, but of acceptance. They understand that peace is not the absence of suffering, but the ability to hold it without being consumed. If you look closely, their light is paradoxical. It carries both sorrow and serenity, both grief and gratitude. It's the glow of someone who has cried until their tears became clarity, who has broken so deeply that the breaking became openness. This light does not deny pain, it illuminates it. It is the kind of light that can look directly at suffering, one's own and others, without turning away. It is compassionate, not because it wants to save, but because it understands. When someone with this light listens to you, you feel seen in a way that bypasses words. They know what it means to feel invisible, so they never let others feel unseen. This inner light also changes their relationship with joy. For those who have suffered, happiness is no longer something they chase, it is something they notice. They find beauty in the smallest details. A child's laughter, a kind gesture, a sunrise after a sleepless night. Their gratitude is not performative, it's visceral. They know how easily everything can vanish, so every moment of peace feels like grace. The light in their eyes comes from having known both the unbearable weight of sorrow and the fragile sweetness of being alive. Their light is not something they try to share, it shares itself naturally. When you are near them, you feel calmer without knowing why. Their energy carries a quiet assurance. Not that everything will be easy, but that everything can be faced. They remind others, without preaching, that survival is possible, that the heart can mend, that meaning can be rebuilt. Their presence becomes medicine for those still trapped in darkness. Not because they have all the answers, but because they embody what endurance looks like when it turns into wisdom. This light behind the eyes also holds forgiveness. People who have suffered and grown through it often stop dividing the world into good and bad, victim and villain. They see that everyone acts from their level of awareness, that pain passes through generations, that hurt people. Their forgiveness does not come from weakness, but from understanding. They release resentment, not because others deserve peace, but because they do. They have learned that holding on to anger is another form of imprisonment. And they've already spent too long in cages built from pain. The hidden light is also a reminder of impermanence. It teaches that nothing, neither suffering nor joy, lasts forever. Those who have walked through their own darkness stop clinging to outcomes. They stop demanding that life be fair or predictable. Instead, they move with it like a river adjusting to its bends. Their strength is not resistance, it's fluidity. They've learned that resilience is not about hardening, but about remaining soft enough to bend without breaking. If you look into the eyes of someone who has truly suffered and healed, you'll see worlds reflected there. You'll see the ruins they've walked through and the gardens they've built afterward. Their gaze holds both the memory of pain and the miracle of having survived it. It holds the understanding that darkness will visit again, but also the unshakable knowing that they will endure it. Their light is not a denial of the night, it is the living proof that dawn always follows. This is the light hidden behind eyes, the quiet glow of a soul that has faced its own shadow and come back not perfect, not unscarred, but real. It is a light that does not blind, it guides. It is not meant to dazzle the world, only to remind it that even in the deepest darkness, something within us still remembers how to shine.